Just the other day I was sitting on my sofa searching for all the secret settings and hidden features on my brand new Galaxy S25 Ultra for a future video of course, and I got to thinking, I kind of wish Samsung made the Ultra in that navy blue color that I saw in San Jose. And that's when there was a knock at the door and this arrived, the Samsung Galaxy S25 Plus. Now at this point I was thinking, if I were to switch from my Ultra to this really nice navy blue S25 Plus, what exactly would I be missing out on? And should I have just saved some money and gone with this in the first place? Well, if you're wondering the same thing, or if you're on the fence and can't decide between the Ultra and the Plus, well, that's the very reason why I made this video, to help you find out what the differences are and to help you and myself make a more informed decision. So let's start with the differences in physical attributes. So the Galaxy S25 Ultra is 4.6mm taller and it's also 1.8mm wider. There is definitely a visible difference here and it's quite significant. However, a side note and a definite upside to the Galaxy S25 Plus is it's 0.9mm thinner, and the fact that it is shorter and less wide means it is easier to use one-handed. And if you're a fan of the rounded corners, let's say you're coming over from an iPhone, the S25 Plus has much more rounded corners than the Galaxy S25 Ultra, so maybe that will feel more like home to you if you are making the switch, or if you just prefer that look in general. Now, on top of the fact that the S25 Plus is easier to hold and use one-handed, it's actually also lighter by 28 grams, total weight 190 grams compared to the total weight of the Ultra, which is 218 grams. And the difference in weight might be due to the battery size being slightly larger on the Ultra at 5000 milliampere compared to the still respectively large 14900 milliampere on the S25 Plus. The charging speeds on both devices peak at the same level, 45 watts. Both phones have Qi 2 ready wireless charging support and can charge at speeds up to 15 watts, and they both do also support 4.5 watts reverse wireless charging for your earbuds and things. So there's a lot of similarities when it comes to charging. But here's where things start to get a bit different. Let's talk about the materials used. The Ultra, being the most premium option from Samsung, does of course have more premium materials, starting with the grade 5 titanium used on the frame, which does give it a slightly different look and a slight edge in durability. The Galaxy S25 Plus uses the more classic Armor Aluminium 2, which still looks really nice and it is still very durable. And at a glance, if you put the two side by side, it's kind of hard to tell the difference. Another premium design choice made on the Ultra is the fact that it is fitted with the brand new Corning Armor Glass 2 front and back, and it is said to be the strongest to date from Corning. And it is the front glass that's really quite special, and we'll come back to that. The Galaxy S25 Plus has Corning's Victus 2 glass front and back, which is also very strong, very scratch resistant. However, one huge difference is that it doesn't have the anti-reflective qualities of the exclusive Armor Glass 2 on the Ultra, which for me, having experienced the Armor Glass 1, is kind of a big deal. Both phones are sealed up to meet the IP68 rating, and they both have dual SIM trays and the same button placements, same sonic fingerprint readers under the display, and I do believe the same stereo speakers, but I can't be sure. So let's put them to the test and let's see if you can hear a difference. So if you thought the S25 Ultra actually sounded a bit better, I'm not sure if the actual hardware itself is any different, but it could be due to the larger frame of the phone. Maybe there's a bit more space in there around that speaker. Anyway, let me know what you thought of that in the comments. Okay, so here's a big difference, and big being the key word. Although both phones' displays are the same LTPO 120Hz dynamic AMOLED, both support HDR10+ and have a peak brightness of 2600 nits. There are some slight differences, because word on the street is the S25 Plus display does peak slightly brighter, and this might be due to the anti-reflective glass used on the S25 Ultra. So that anti-reflective quality is a win, but it might actually restrict the peak brightness a tiny bit. And it's also worth noting that anti-reflective display is fantastic, but as soon as you put a screen protector on it, that entire effect goes away. So you kind of have to decide whether you want to risk not having a screen protector and making the most of that anti-reflective display, or whether to put a screen protector on it and basically make it look exactly like the S25 Plus with that regular glass reflection. Anyway, I get sidetracked. The Ultra's display is 0.2 inches larger on the diagonal, and the screen to body ratio on the Ultra is 0.7% better. So you get a bigger display and less visible bezels on the Ultra, and that is something you will notice. But is that a good enough reason to spend more? Now, before you answer that, you should probably know the S25 Plus has a slightly better pixel density than the Ultra at 513 ppi versus 498. So on paper, the S25 Plus should look a little bit sharper and the display is a little bit brighter. So that's a couple of wins there for the S25 Plus. All right, now let's talk about speed and power. These Galaxies have the same Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy, the same 12 gigs of LPDDR5X RAM, and the same UFS 4.0 storage. But does that mean the performance is exactly the same? Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's speed run a 20-minute benchmark test, and I'll show you some thermal imaging as well. So there is something you should know. Even though both the phones have the same processing abilities and same hardware and same chips and RAM and storage, the Galaxy S25 Ultra has been upgraded by Samsung with a larger vapor cooling chamber. Compared to last year's model, it's increased by 40%. And that's why you're seeing a difference in these thermal shots. So to put this very simply, the heat dissipation is much quicker on the Galaxy S25 Ultra. Okay, here's just a quick look at the results after that 20-minute benchmark test. And it's quite interesting. The S25 Plus has a better loop score. So on one of the loops, it actually outperformed the best performance here on the Ultra. The lowest loop score is quite a bit lower than the S25 Ultra, and the stability is also quite a bit lower. And if we just scroll down here through the graphs a little bit, you can get an idea of how the performance varied. What I really want to show you here is the performance monitoring section, because you can see the battery drop off. So we lost 8% on the Plus and only 7% on the Ultra. The temperature range as well is quite significant. So 30 degrees at its coolest up to 46 degrees, which is a bit too hot. And you'll notice the temperature here ranges from 32 up to 43, which is kind of the range where the phone can perform the best. But interestingly, the frame rates are actually a little bit better on the Plus, so I didn't see that coming. Okay, now let's talk about the shooters. This is another area where the two phones differ quite a bit. The primary camera on the S25 Plus is a tried and true 50 megapixel sensor, and is good. But if you're willing to pay more for the Ultra, you get a much larger 200 megapixel primary camera. And this is typically the camera you'll use the most. And it's worth noting the megapixel count is larger, of course, but also the pixel sizes are larger at 0.6 micrometer, and this makes the Ultra's light gathering abilities better than the Plus model, which should result in better low light photography. The aperture on the Ultra is also slightly wider too, and this can also help with low light photography, and at the same time it can also help create a more natural shallow depth of field effect for those kind of portrait shots. Both have a dedicated 10 megapixel telephoto. They use the same aperture and the same 67mm focal length equivalent, but the sensors are different. And again, the Ultra has a slight edge with a slightly larger sensor and larger pixel sizes. But let me know, in these two photos, is there a notable difference in this 10 megapixel telephoto shot? Let me know. Now, here are two very significant differences. So if you're still on the fence between these phones, I think this might nudge you one way or the other. You get a decent 12 megapixel ultra wide on the S25 Plus. Again, it's a tried and true, trusty old Samsung camera setup. But with the Ultra, if you spend more, you get a brand new 50 megapixel ultra wide, which is definitely noticeably better. It's also important to consider the fact that this same sensor and lens combo is used for macro photography. So if that's something you like to do, this is kind of a big deal. And of course, the Ultra has one more secret weapon, kind of like the nuclear option. It's got a 50 megapixel periscope zoom camera, which allows you to 100x into the distance. And this is undoubtedly nice to have, but is it necessary for you personally? That is a question. From my experience, it does come in handy occasionally when I need to read signage at longer distances, for example, at an airport. But it is important to remember that the Plus model does also have a 30x digital zoom range, which is quite good, but it's not quite in the same league as the Ultras. So let me know what you think about that. And if you are wondering, the selfie cameras are identical, 12 megapixel f2.2, 26mm equivalent. Can you see a difference here? I'll be surprised if you can. All right, so at this point, hopefully you're starting to get a clearer picture of the pros and cons between these two phones. But before you go, you should know the Ultra has one more magic trick up his sleeve. And there is one more powerful factor to consider if you're leaning towards either one. So of course the magic trick that I'm referring to is the Galaxy S25 Ultra's S Pen. Now this is great for people who prefer to handwrite things instead of typing. It's also great for just sketching quick notes and for drawing and art apps and things like that. But honestly, since the removal of the Bluetooth in the S Pen, the gap between the usability features on the S25 Plus and the Ultra has kind of shrunk quite a bit, because most of the stuff you can do with the S Pen now can be done with your fingers on the Plus. I guess the advantage is the S Pen allows you to be a bit more precise and a bit more creative. Okay, so that last decisive and important factor to consider between these two phones, and this really could make you change your mind, it is the difference in price at the time of this video. The Ultra will cost you around £250 more than the Plus, but are the upgrades and advantages mentioned in this video worth it? Or on the other hand, should you save that £250 and go with the S25 Plus, and maybe in what I consider to be the nicest S25 color this year, the navy blue? Now if this video has helped you decide which one to go for but you haven't ordered it yet, that's good news, because I do have an exclusive affiliate link to Samsung's official website that will unlock a bunch of extra discounts and some Samsung store credit, and in some countries you might get some freebies thrown in for free. So if you are going to buy one, definitely have a look at that link. I'll pin it in the top comment. So let me know guys, given all the pros and cons mentioned in this video, which one do you think is the better deal? Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, a little thumbs up, subscribe would be appreciated. And if you just subscribed, you're now one of the finest subscribers known to man, and I will see you in the next one. Don't be late.